The question did not sound like a child's question. It sounded like something far older, something that had lived through winters and hunger and fear. It came from a little girl whose voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of generations. "Mommy, if we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" That single sentence fractured the silence inside a grocery store where people pretended not to notice a mother counting coins with trembling fingers. It was not just about food. It was about fear, about survival, about a world that had quietly decided who was worthy of comfort and who was not. And what happened next shattered the heart of a man no one expected to care. Before we begin this story, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Story for more powerful, thought-provoking stories that reveal truths many people would rather ignore. The town of Ashford had the kind of silence that looked peaceful from a distance. Tree-lined streets, brick storefronts, flags fluttering lazily in the afternoon breeze. But beneath the quiet exterior was a history few wanted to acknowledge, a history of division that ran deeper than the sidewalks. On the east side of town, past the railroad tracks, lived families who had learned not to expect too much. The houses were older there, the paint chipped, the lawns uneven. It was where many black families had settled decades earlier after being told, politely and indirectly, that certain neighborhoods were not a good fit. Marissa Johnson lived there with her 6-year-old daughter, Layla. Marissa had once believed that education would be her ladder out. She had studied late into the night, while working double shifts at a diner. She had earned a degree in social work, fueled by a fierce desire to help others who had grown up feeling invisible. But degrees did not erase skin color in Ashford. Interviews came and went. Positions were suddenly filled. Emails were never returned. Eventually, survival replaced ambition. She worked part-time at a warehouse 30 miles away, leaving before sunrise and returning after dark. The pay barely covered rent and utilities. Food was a careful calculation. Beans stretched over days, rice divided into measured portions, bread frozen to last longer. Layla was observant in a way children often are when life forces them to grow too fast. She noticed when the fridge hummed emptily. She noticed when her mother skipped meals and pretended she wasn't hungry. She noticed the envelopes marked final notice, and she had started asking questions. Marissa tried to protect her daughter from the truth, but hunger has a way of speaking loudly even when adults stay silent. On the other side of town, life looked different. Motorcycles lined the parking lot of a roadside bar known as the Iron Lantern. Leather jackets, heavy boots, patch-covered vests. Among them was a man known simply as Reaper, a longtime member of the local Hells Angels chapter. His real name was Daniel Reed. To the town, he was a stereotype. Loud engine, hard stare, trouble waiting to happen. Parents pulled children closer when he walked by. Store managers watched him through security cameras. But Daniel carried ghosts that few could see. He had grown up in foster homes after losing his mother to an overdose and his father prison. He had learned early that the world offered protection only to those who looked strong enough to demand it. The motorcycle club became his armor. Brotherhood replaced abandonment. Still, beneath the leather and steel was a heart that had once known hunger too. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, paths that should never have crossed began quietly moving toward collision. Marissa had exactly $12.47 in her wallet. Rent was due in 4 days. She needed milk, bread, and something that could last. The grocery store lights felt too bright as she pushed the cart with careful deliberation. Layla walked beside her, small hand gripping the side of the basket. Every item placed inside was weighed not by price alone, but by tomorrow's consequences. In the same store, Daniel had stopped in for cigarettes and coffee. He disliked grocery stores. Too many eyes, too much silent judgment. But he needed supplies before a long ride. He did not expect to hear the sentence that would follow him for the rest of his life. The checkout line was slow, the air heavy with quiet impatience. Marissa counted her total mentally before the cashier even scanned the items. Milk, $3.49. Bread, $2.19. Eggs, $2.89. A small bag of rice. A discounted pack of ground turkey nearing its expiration date. She had calculated carefully. But Prices had risen again. When the final total flashed on the screen, it exceeded what she had prepared for by $3.82. $3.82 might not mean much to most people in line that day, but to Marissa, it was the difference between light and darkness. Her face remained composed, but her fingers trembled slightly as she began removing items. First the turkey, then the eggs. Layla watched, confusion clouding her young eyes. That was when she asked it, "Mommy, if we eat today, will we starve tomorrow?" The words were soft, but in the silence of that fluorescent-lit space, they echoed. Several heads turned. The cashier shifted uncomfortably. Marissa felt heat rush to her face. Not shame of poverty, but the shame society placed upon it. The unspoken accusation that she had somehow failed. Behind them, Daniel froze. He did not look at the child immediately. He looked at the mother. He recognized that posture, the stiff back trying not to break. He had seen it in his own mother years before she disappeared into addiction. The store manager approached, eyes flicking between Marissa's removed items and her worn jacket. Policies mattered more than context. Daniel felt something old stir in his chest, but he hesitated. In Ashford, men like him were already labeled threats. A biker intervening in a situation involving a black woman and her child could easily spiral into misunderstanding. Police response times were quick in certain neighborhoods. He stayed silent as Marissa quietly told the cashier to void the remaining items and slid the milk aside as well. They would manage without it. As she reached for her small bag of rice and bread, Daniel stepped forward. He placed a $50 bill on the counter without saying a word. The cashier blinked. The manager frowned. Daniel's voice, when it came, was steady and low. He simply nodded toward the groceries. The manager hesitated, then relented. Marissa tried to refuse, pride warring with desperation. But Daniel had already stepped back, giving space rather than imposing it. He did not seek gratitude. He did not ask questions. He simply walked out. But something had shifted inside him. Later that evening, he could not shake the memory of Layla's voice. It echoed louder than motorcycle engines, louder than barroom laughter. He began noticing things he had ignored before. The boarded-up grocery store on the east side, the long bus routes required to reach basic services, the way police cruisers lingered longer in certain neighborhoods. He spoke to an older club member who had grown up in Ashford decades earlier. Stories surfaced about red line maps, denied loans, schools that received less funding. Daniel had lived on society's margins himself, but he had never truly examined how race intertwined with poverty in his town. Meanwhile, Marissa returned home conflicted. Gratitude mingled with unease. She had accepted help from someone society had taught her to fear, and yet that stranger had been the only one who acted. The following week, Daniel returned to the store intentionally. He bought extra supplies and left them anonymously at the community center on the east side. He began researching food deserts, reading late into the night. At club meetings, he proposed organizing a food drive. Some members scoffed. Others listened. Reputation mattered to them. Image mattered. But Daniel argued something different. That strength meant protecting the vulnerable, not reinforcing divisions. Reluctantly, a few agreed to help. They collected canned goods, negotiated discounts from suppliers who were wary at first, but intrigued by the unexpected initiative. Word spread slowly. Not everyone welcomed it. Some residents questioned motives. Others saw opportunity for change. The tension in Ashford began to surface openly. Social media posts accused the bikers of seeking attention. Others criticized the town's leadership for ignoring East Side struggles for decades. Marissa watched from a distance. She did not know Daniel's name, but she recognized the leather vest when she saw photos of the food drive online. She debated attending. Fear lingered, not of him, but of visibility, of being seen as needy. But Layla remembered, and hunger remembered too. The day of the food distribution arrived under heavy skies. Motorcycles lined the parking lot of the East Side Community Center, their chrome reflecting gray clouds. Tables were stacked with boxes of food, fresh produce, diapers, and hygiene products. Daniel stood near the entrance, arms crossed not in defiance but in uncertainty. He was used to battle stances, not welcoming gestures. Families approached cautiously. Among them was Marissa, hand in Layla's. Eyes followed them, not hostile, but curious. The collision of worlds felt almost fragile, as though one wrong movement could shatter it. When Daniel saw Layla, recognition struck immediately. The weight of that grocery store moment returned full force. Marissa recognized him, too. For a brief second, time slowed. This was a turning point, not dramatic in noise, but monumental in meaning. Daniel stepped forward, not imposing, simply present. He gestured toward the tables, ensuring they received what they needed. There was no speech, no grandstanding. But cameras from a local news station had arrived, drawn by the unusual sight of a Hells Angels chapter organizing aid in a historically neglected neighborhood. The coverage sparked conversation across Ashford. Some praised the effort. Others questioned why it took outsiders with controversial reputations, to highlight systemic neglect. Town officials, feeling pressure, announced new funding initiatives. Plans for a smaller grocery co-op began forming. Community leaders found leverage in the sudden attention. For Daniel, the true climax was quieter. Later that afternoon, he watched Layla bite into a fresh apple with unguarded joy. The simple act pierced something deep within him. He realized that strength had never been about intimidation. It had been about courage to confront injustice, even the kind woven subtly into daily life. Marissa felt something shift too, not just relief from temporary hunger, but the beginning of restored dignity. The silence that once surrounded East Side struggles had been broken, and it had started with a child's question. Change in Ashford did not happen overnight, but it began moving. The food drive became monthly. Partnerships formed between unlikely groups. Churches collaborated with motorcycle clubs. Volunteers from wealthier neighborhoods began crossing the railroad tracks not as saviors, but as neighbors. Daniel worked quietly behind the scenes. He never sought leadership titles. He simply continued showing up. Marissa eventually found stable employment through a nonprofit expanding services in response to increased community attention. Her degree, once dismissed, finally found purpose. Layla's question remained a compass for them both. Years later, the east side of Ashford had a small cooperative grocery store owned by community members. It was not perfect. It did not erase history. But children no longer asked whether eating today meant starving tomorrow. Daniel still rode his motorcycle. The leather vest remained. But people saw him differently, and he saw himself differently too. The story was never about a biker saving a family. It was about empathy breaking through prejudice. It was about recognizing that injustice often hides in plain sight, behind grocery store counters, within zoning laws, inside quiet assumptions. And it was about a child's voice strong enough to shatter indifference. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the silent struggles around you, don't stay silent yourself. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to Black Voice Story so we can continue telling stories that matter, stories that challenge injustice and remind us that even hardened hearts can change when confronted with truth.